Let's make sure you guys are good here real quick with handout materials. Let me just go ahead and share my screen with everybody real quickly to make sure we're good to go on that front. If you guys did not get the handout looks a little something like this with this curmudgeonly dude here on it. If you didn't get that, it's very easy to get right now if you want to have the handout that we're going to be viewing today, although we'll also be sharing it on my screen, so that'll be an easy way to see it as well, and you can download the handout later. But as you can see, we're at our website right now, pjtestprep.com, and right here at the top it says essay handout, essay seminar handout right under the what's new, so you can go ahead and navigate on to pjtestprep.com if you want to get the handout that we're going through today. I'll make that announcement one more time here before we get going. Actually, before we get going to the essay portion, I do want to sort of first intro this thing and just give a quick greeting. And I think the way I'm going to do this is kind of warm up. I know these Zoom things, it always takes people a few minutes to warm in. So I'm going to just quickly say hello. I'm Paul Jury from PJ Test Prep. I'm going to open this with actually some general college admissions stuff that may or may not have to do with the essay directly, but there's been new news and new developments that you guys probably know about, but I want to just make sure everybody's cool on that. First, I did want to get a sense of, let me stop screen sharing for a second here. We'll resume this in a second. First, I just wanted to get a sense of who we've got in the room. For those of you who have your screens or your cameras on, you can just raise your hand or something. If you don't, you can just put it in the chat or something. But I'm curious as to what years we've got in this group here. I know we've got a couple of juniors, those who I know. Who is a junior or going to be a senior next year? Raise your hand if that's you. I know Fiona and Andrea, that's you guys. Anybody else, you're welcome to throw that in the chat room. Oh, thumbs up, perfect. That's an even easier way to do it. Okay, what about current sophomores who are going to be juniors next year? Is that anybody? Give me your thumbs up. It looked like there's one new one there. Anybody younger, freshmen, or the 8th graders here somehow? Okay, cool. Looks like, as we usually have with these essay seminars, mostly juniors. Perfect. Okay. So I will get to you guys in a second in terms of what this essay is going to be about. Thank you, Driscoll, for typing that in. But first, a couple of just quick intro highlights that you guys should know about if you don't already. Number one, you guys should be, at this point, juniors, researching your colleges. Now, this is especially hard this year, and I'm super sorry about that, especially when it comes to visiting and stuff, although I do have some suggestions about that. But no matter what, even if you're a sophomore, this is something you can get a start on. You guys should be buffering up your college list at this point, which means researching colleges. And the good news is the primary way we do that these days is with websites. There's a million of these websites. The other day I was just going through and looking all the new recommended ones, but Unigo, Niche, College, what is it? College Confidential. Literally just Google best college research websites and you'll find 18 different top 10 lists, and you can sort and see which ones fit your style. Some of them are very like mobile friendly. Others are kind of more like old fashioned, fully comprehensive lists and stuff like that. But you guys, you juniors who are going to be seniors next year, you should have a bunch of schools on your list already. And over the summer, you should be starting to even narrow those down into the ones you're actually going to apply to. Because with things as they are this year, where the application curriculum is a little different, you'll want that list to guide you. Like, do you want to take the SAT, ACT in the fall when they start running again? The short answer is probably yes. But if you're just applying to a bunch of schools that are going test blind and won't even look at your scores, maybe you don't have to. You'll also want to be thinking for this particular seminar about what the essay prompts for the schools that you're looking at are. So step one, build that list out so you got 20, 25 schools that you're choosing between, and then start narrowing that list down. It's tough to tour schools right now for a variety of reasons. I hope that will get easier. Obviously, before you go to a college, you're probably going to want to set foot on campus to see if you like it. There are virtual tours, though. Just Google virtual college tours, and you'll find all sorts of ways you can do that. If you're wondering about your particular school's college admissions requirements, just contact them directly. Another really useful thing that does is it demonstrates interest in the school. There's this thing called demonstrated interest, I'm sure most of you have heard of, wherein you show the college that really, no, seriously, I'm going to go there. I'm going to be, interested in this college if you guys will let me in. So do contact the colleges, even if you're like, you already know everything, just like pretend you have a question and contact them and say, hey, I'm very interested in your school. And that way you have like an email train of, yeah, I did contact you guys. Yeah, you should call me up with your application. Another question we've been getting a ton of is about pass fail versus letter grades. I know you guys are all freaking out about that. Don't freak out about that. Colleges are going to be super lenient this year about that. So if you have one weird grade or one pass fail that you're not sure about, that's not going to be what sinks you at a school. They know it's really hard for everybody. So it's okay. That being said, it's always best to optimize your situation. Generally, the rule of thumb I've been going with is, I mean, this goes without saying, but if you think you're going to get an A in a class or an A minus, then take the grade. If you're going to get a D, then do the pass fail thing. If it's somewhere in between, it kind of depends on what your GPA is. But the quick answer is, if a letter grade is going to really hurt your GPA, like you have a 4.8 and you're looking at a B minus, then maybe take the pass fail. But if you have a 4.8, a B plus or an A minus is not really going to hurt your grade. Like there's not really a difference between a 3.7 and a 3 or 4.7 and 4.8. So if it's only negligibly going to hurt your grade, even if it would bring it down a little, you might still consider
see me or hear me?
Taking the, yeah, I can see or hear somebody there. I don't know which person that is. Maybe Piper. I might mute you guys here just so that we can get the background noise eliminated. But do consider taking that one as a letter grade if it's not going to hurt you that much. I had a kid recently who said that they have a very high GPA. It's like a 4.3 or something, and they're looking at getting a B in a class, which would bring them down to like a 3.25. But it was a class that they really struggled in the fall, and I think got a C. And our advice was, actually, I think it would look good to have a B or a B plus in that class because it shows that you muscled that up to from a C, even if technically it still hurts your grades a little bit. So consider that general rule of thumb. It's going to hurt your grades a lot. Go for the pass fail. If it's not, maybe you go for the grade because that looks cool. Either way, though, they're super forgiving. It'll be all right. The last and maybe the biggest news a lot of you guys I'm sure have heard of is the announcement by the UCs that they are trying to phase out the SAT, the ACT. That mostly applies to younger students than you guys. It looks like it's all juniors and sophomores. For you guys, it's still going to be test optional. Let me actually share my screen again, and I'll show you guys a thing that's got that detail on it. Guys, if you are a rising senior or rising junior, the SAT and the ACT are going to be test optional, mostly because of COVID, and that's the right move. I mean, there will be some kids who just can't physically take the test because they already canceled so many of them in the spring. Our advice is typically try to take it if you can. If you can't, it's fine. But because test optional means your score can only help you, like it can only move your grades up, and if you do badly on the SAT or the ACT, then don't submit it. It's still a really good idea too, especially if you already did prep for it or you were planning to. It really can't hurt you. It can only help you. So it's almost a good thing this year. It does help set you apart. If you have a 3.9, but so does every single other person who's applying to UCLA, that might not be enough to get you in. You might need an SAT score to help bump that up or something else like your essay, which we'll talk about in just a second. So I would still recommend that. My recommended plan of attack, if you didn't get a chance to take the SAT or the ACT yet, try to take the August SAT, try to take the September ACT. If you're only going to focus on one test or the other, then pick which one, or if you're going to do them both, try them both. And then you can do retakes in October. You can use November and December as backup dates. Deadlines probably will be pushed off a little bit this year, so you should be okay in that department. And if you need some prep stuff, we are running all of our summer prep courses. Many of them will be on Zoom. If it's safe to get back in classes, we'll try that. But just like we're teaching you guys here, we're going to be doing SAT classes and stuff all summer. So anyway, some of you already know me, are already in our classes, but feel free to consider that if you need help. Okay, guys, I want to formally begin this essay presentation now. We've got a good group here, looks like. And I'm going to stop sharing for a sec just to say hello. I'm Paul Jury. I'm the founder of PJ Test Prep. More on me in a second. But I want to welcome you guys to our little essay presentation here today. As we have covered and will cover again, the essay is going to be absolutely freaking huge this year because of grades and SATs and ACTs and basically everything else being devalued. This is going to be extra valued because it's really one of the only things you can do while you're stuck inside in a quarantine. So I, again, want to welcome everybody. One little housekeeping business. If you haven't got our handout yet, then you can navigate your way to pjtestprep.com if you weren't sent it already. Right at the top of our page is going to be a link to that handout right here. The handout looks like this, and it is what we're going to be covering today. And so that's where I'm going to start. Get this out of the way and delve into our lesson, guys. So again, you guys are looking at a very interesting year. And usually there's 4 things that colleges look at when they're considering you as an applicant at their school. Obviously there's grades. That's always the most important thing. At this point, those are what they are. There's not a lot you can do to change them as a senior, especially if you're taking classes from your computer at home. Their activities also are a little limited right now, but you've all been involved in sports and extracurriculars, and that's another thing you can be doing from home. I'm going to speak a little bit about writing your essay about some of these activities that you do. The short answer is, please don't just write your essay about how hard COVID is, because it's hard for everybody. But something interesting that you do during this period could be possible grounds for your essay. There's also, of course, your SAT, ACT scores. And lastly, there's the U quadrant of what these people are looking for. The U quadrant is who you are as a person, what your sort of individual story is. This is demonstrated partly by if you can do an interview or your teacher recs. But most importantly, the primary way that this is demonstrated is through your college application essays. So we're going to talk about what that means. We're going to go through some overall tips of the way that you guys should approach these. Then we're going to talk about who this guy is and how you are going to write for him or her through 3 approaches that are very, very useful for coming up with ideas for this. So first, a couple of little things. We talked about the changes that the silly virus is making for 2021 in terms of the test prep and so forth. All schools will give extra weight to your college essays this year, so that just makes this stuff all the more important. First, a few overall tips. Guys, logistically, most students in our area, in California as a whole, in fact, are applying to typically UCs because they're great schools and they're cheaper than other great schools, and then often at least one Common App school or some other school outside of the usual UC system. Because of that, first make your list to figure out what those schools even are, then make a plan. I typically recommend doing your UC application essays first. This is because there are 4 of them. They call them the 4 UC Insight questions. They're very short essays. They're only 350 words max. You still can and should tell a little bit of a story there, but it's almost like a tryout ground to figure out if you have 10 ideas that you've narrowed down to your 4 best ones and matched to the UC prompts. Maybe then of those 4, whichever one turns out the best, you can use that for your Common App, which is going to be a completely separate, nobody's going to be seeing both. That's a good way to make sure you've got a good piece of writing and a good idea before you even get into that one. You can even combine 2 ideas if maybe there's 2 things that thematically or kind of 2 parts of the same story that you can work through. After you've completed all of those, at least drafts of them, that's when you'd be thinking about your supplements. Your supplements are for scholarships or for special programs at schools, or a lot of schools will just have a bunch of different supplements. I've been helping a lot of kids with their Stanford essays recently, and they have lots of different supplements in addition to their primary essay. Why not use one of your UC essays for that? You're not going to use it for anything else for that school, and you've already got it kind of in the hopper. Those also supplements often tend to be shorter, as do the UC prompts. So that's a good way to kind of repurpose your second or third favorite essay from that batch. Another thing that kind of goes without saying, sort of common sense, but a lot of people overlook this because there's a lot of human biases towards this. But guys, don't say what's already been said elsewhere on your application. There's enough room already for you to mention your different extracurriculars and that you were the president of the student body or the captain of the water polo team or whatever it is. Generally, these essays are supposed to be for conveying information that they can't get somewhere else on your application. But a lot of people just have this like flagship activity, like, oh, I am the captain of the debate team, or, oh, I started this charity where we raised a bunch of money for homeless shelters or something. I'm not saying you can't write your essay about that. Certainly, if there's a story there, go ahead. But, you know, if you're the president of National Honor Society and the only thing that you do on National Honor Society is organize meetings to collect recycling after football games, and that's really it, I mean, isn't it more baller to just have that you're president of the National Honor Society on your resume? Sorry about that. And then not say anything about it? That, in a way, is kind of more appealing than actually bragging about it. So again, if you have a story there, you can go ahead and tell that. But if you don't, try to tell your story about something else instead. All right, sorry, there's something wrong with my computer I gotta fix. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So write your essay about something else, something that doesn't have a place to be mentioned elsewhere on your application. Should I write about COVID? Short answer is please do not write about COVID directly. Nobody wants to hear about what a bummer it was that your junior prom got canceled. And it was so hard and you were so sad. But that being said, COVID is a backdrop for a lot of what's going on. And so if you have a story that came out of what you did with your spring or your summer, that's fine. Think of writing about COVID as writing about high school. You would never write an essay about, I go to high school, and at high school, I work really hard and I do homework. And so you should let me into your college. Every high school student has that thing. Every high school student has been going through the pandemic. And so just writing about that in itself is the opposite of setting yourself apart. So don't do that. But if you got you got a job doing, I don't know, you're interested in medicine and you've been like helping diagnose people over Zoom meetings, and that's taught you a lot about both technology and medicine, and now you want to do a double major in like biotech or something, like that would be cool. That essay is not really about COVID though. That essay is about you and what you're doing with your life. So keep that in mind. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. No matter what approach you pick, this one's super obvious, but make sure it's a good piece of writing. Get help with this. You can't just bang this out in one sitting. You're going to need to brainstorm a bunch of stuff. You're going to need to get some input on what ideas are good to include, maybe some organizational things. Some people have an easier time with this than others, but once you think you've got a decent draft, you must show it to somebody and find out whether it's actually a piece of garbage or whether it's really a good draft. I'm happy to look at it. Your teachers are happy to look at it. Your counselors, your parents, even send it to a friend, but it's going to take multiple drafts. I don't think I've ever seen a top level essay for somebody's college apps be done in under 3 drafts. Like even the best writers, there's still stuff that needs to be fixed about their first draft. It's coming across with the wrong tone, or it's way too long, or there's no message and stuff like that. So get help. This is not something you can just do at the last minute. It's not a one-page book report on Huck Finn, although it's about as long as that. Get help. Make sure this is polished. Finally, we're going to tell some stories today about the things that these college application officers are looking for and ways that you can give them what they want. But let me caveat before I get into any of that, guys. This essay, first and foremost, needs to be about you. It needs to be about showing who you are. So among these stories that I'm going to tell today, you may hear one that you're like, oh, that's a cool story, but that doesn't really sound like me. I don't think I would write this essay. Then please don't. That's not your essay. Hopefully you hear something else that sounds a little more like something that you would write or do, but don't sacrifice being genuine for trying to sell out and give them what they want. The ideal version of this is you start with ideas that come from you, and then you think about these ideas within the framework of these approaches and sort of shape them in the optimal direction. Okay, so with that all said, guys, welcome again. I am PJ Test Prep. Well, not really, but I am Paul Jury, founder of PJ Test Prep. I guess I am the PJ. And I'm happy you guys are here. Thank you for those of you who joined in the last 2 minutes. Let's jump in. Okay, so we're on page 2 of our handout now. Today I want to talk about 3 approaches that can really help you brainstorm a standout application essay. One of the first rules of writing, no matter what you guys are writing, whether it's a thank you letter to your grandma for the sweet birthday present, or a love note to your significant other, or a funny text to a friend, or a book report, or a chemistry lab, one of the first rules of writing is you must always consider your audience. And guys, for your college application essay, this is your audience. This guy right here. Well, to be honest, demographically, it's slightly more likely to be female and a little bit younger, but you got the idea. It's some curmudgeonly person who's had to read 9,000 of these this weekend. They've seen every possible essay ever. They're just very jaded about the world in general, especially now. But we need to consider this person when we're crafting our essays. First of all, another valedictorian. Oh my God, I've read 18 people bragging about their 4.0 GPA in a row. I know my school is selective. I can just pick only 4.0s if I want. I just wish I could read an essay from somebody who's different. Also, this is my 5,000th one today. I really, really, really wish I could see an interesting application essay. These are so boring and dull and braggy. Can someone tell me a story about something? I just want to hear something different. On the other hand, if I can get that kid who's really, really impressive, sounds like they're going to go off in the world and kick butt and make waves, maybe my boss will finally give me that raise that I've been after. And of course, like I said, it's got to be a piece of good writing. You have to make sure everything is polished. Not going to really talk about this last one because we already hit that and you know it. And that comes into more once you've got your draft and you're polishing. These other 3 thought bubbles, though, are what we're going to gear our 3 approaches to, because these are genuine concerns. If your essay is not really making you seem any different than anybody else, if your essay is not particularly interesting, your essay doesn't seem like it makes you very impressive, what does it have going on for it? Show that you're a really hilarious writer? Okay, well, if it's hilarious enough, it should be interesting. All of those functions kind of factor into this. So we're going to talk today about 3 approaches that you can take as you're brainstorming. Students, as you're listening to this, I would highly recommend that if you come up with ideas as you're thinking about this, or parents do, jot them down. The goal of this is to make the brainstorming process easier for you guys. I would love it if every one of you could have 4 or 5 ideas scrawled in the margins of this page here as you're doing this. You can also jump ahead and start looking at this application essay brainstorm sheet on the next page, page 3 of the handout. And that will help get you jump started, hopefully leave this meeting with some momentum in order to make this process easier as we get into our summary. So, approach number 1, make waves, or as we call it sometimes, be impressive. Any old kid can get good grades in college, graduate, get a job. Counselors want to find bigger fish. Their jobs depend on it. Basically, this is the most cynical of all of the approaches. It kind of banks on the idea that colleges are just businesses. And a college's business model is easier if the college has a really good brand. If everybody wants to apply to the college can charge whatever it wants and make all kinds of money, and then it uses to build new fountains and buildings and hire new fancy professors who have great research and so on and so forth. So how do schools get that way? How do they move up in the U.S. News and World Rankings report? Well, this is going to sound really bad, but one of the main factors that helps a school move up in the rankings for those silly charts and everything that mean so much to people is alumni donations. I went to Northwestern, a school that probably never should have let me in based on my high school GPA, but I was good at tests and I was good at essays, so for some reason they decided to take a chance. I think the highest they ever got in the rankings, they might be back there now, but I think they were 7th or 8th or 9th or something. And that was the year after they went to the Rose Bowl for the first time. Now, obviously, going to the Rose Bowl does not in any way make you a better academic school. They just got lucky, put some football wins together. I think Darnell Autry was playing for them. And then all these alumni donated all this money because they were so excited to see their team actually playing in a meaningful football game for once. They jumped up a bunch of slots that year. Why? Why would alumni donations matter? Who cares about that? Well, one could argue that, you know, colleges are supposed to do two things. One, they're supposed to make you successful. And as cynical as it may sound, there is one universally recognizable sign of success, and that is money. Anybody who's super good at anything, people pay them money for it. And the other thing is people should enjoy going to the school. And I guess what better measure is there than that you became really successful and that you liked your school rather than you giving a bunch of money back to it. So regardless, college admissions officers are always thinking in the back of their heads, like, how can I find the next kid who's going to be a billionaire and donate all this money back to the school? How can I find the next CEO? How can I find the next president of something, the next hedge fund guy, the next whatever it is? How can I find the kid who's going to start the next Facebook? Well, here's what you don't do. You write your essay about, I'm going to start the next Facebook, because first of all, that's very presumptuous. The tone is all off on that. You're probably not going to start Facebook. Somebody already did that. And third, I mean, Facebook's not even cool anymore. So how do we do that? Well, the way that we show what we are going to do that's impressive in the world is by showing what we have already done that hopefully was some level of impressive. So talk about the accomplishments that you've gone through. Talk about the things that you have done that maybe not everybody has done. A key element of a Make Waves essay is there has to be some part of it where you take some action or do something that most people your age wouldn't do. You joined some activity, you started some club, you stepped up and made some speech, something where they get a sense of, oh, this kid's gonna go and do stuff. And that's where these stories originate. So start on your brainstorming by thinking of things that you've done, that you did in high school or junior high or wherever, that possibly demonstrate some kind of impressiveness, and then talk about what happened. Let them get the idea that you're going to go and do this big stuff in college. You don't even need to talk about what you're going to do if you've shown a good job of what you've already done. So in the spirit of showing and not telling, let me stop telling and start showing. I'm going to give you guys two stories here real quick. Two things that students have done that they've written about that sort of get across this idea. So the first is called My First Play. Well, most of these essays don't have titles except for the 50% Russia, 50% Redonda one we'll get to in a minute. But this essay was written by a student who was really interested in theater and writing, particularly creative writing. They went to a school that had a very active theater program where they had a chance to, you know, do the big Shakespeare play in the fall and the big winter musical and stuff. Then in the spring, they did this thing where students would actually submit plays. They'd write these 20 to 30 page plays, submit them, and then the very picky theater director would select the ones that were best and assign them to student directors who would then, of course, cast student actors, and then hilarity would ensue as they played these plays out in this big sort of bonanza at the end of the year. So this student sees this freshman year and is like, oh my God, I gotta do this. I gotta figure out how to do this. The only problem is I have no idea how to write a play. So after their freshman year, sophomore year summer, they set about learning how to do that. They got some books from the library, they looked up online, read some of their favorite plays, learned how to format it and so forth, and wrote their first ever play, this silly piece about a kid who gets a time-stopping device and stops time at school lunch and all kinds of funny havoc ensues. Anyway, the play gets selected.
What?
And is that a what to the question? The essay opens as this student is stuck in that warm, hot auditorium as they're sitting carefully in the selected aisle seat next to the door so that they can run fleeing if this all goes horribly, horribly wrong. And suddenly the spotlight hits a character that they had invented out of their brain. Walks out on the stage, says their first line, and the audience laughs. And then another character that the author had invented walks out onto the stage, says their first line, and the audience laughs. And there in that warm, dark auditorium, this kid is hit with this feeling of, oh my God, I know what I want to do with my life. Now, at no point in this essay did they say, I'm going to be a Tony-winning playwright, so you better let me into your school or I'm going to donate all my money somewhere else. But you kind of got that idea. Notice how they slid the impressive things kind of subtly into the essay. They talked about how they wrote a play sophomore year after teaching themselves how to do it. Who does that? Who goes home freshman summer and just teaches themselves how to write plays? Also, it got selected, I guess, on the first try by this very picky theater director. So, it must have beat out a bunch of juniors and seniors. They didn't even need to say that. It's sort of implied. They also mentioned at one point, I think in the conclusion of the essay, that they had also had plays accepted junior year and they're looking forward to their third one senior year, which again shows there's some longevity here. And if the essay's well written, they'll get a sense that the kid's also a good writer. They slide that stuff in there and the play seems like it was well received. So these are indicators that, man, this kid sounds like they have something. They're going to do something on campus. They're going to do things in the world. I should probably let them in just in case they become wildly successful. So think about the things that you have done and let those demonstrate the things that you will do. Example 2, mock trial, real trial. This is a kid who was in mock trial, which I don't know if you guys have a mock trial team, but it's similar to Model UN. I know you guys have one of those. Or debate. Basically, you just, get up and you pretend like you're having a fake courtroom and you debate stuff like, how to cure hunger in Africa or like how to fight a pandemic or something like that. Very grandiose kinds of stuff. And this kid didn't join for any noble reason or anything. They just needed an activity freshman year, and their dad said, well, you sure like to argue a lot. Why don't you do it for an extracurricular? So the kid joined mock trial, had a couple good seasons, enjoyed it, and they placed well in a couple of tournaments and so forth. And then the end of junior year rolls around, and the coach of the team takes the kid aside and says, listen, you've been with the team for a couple of years now. What would you think about maybe being the captain next year? The kid says, coach, I'm really honored. I got to level with you though. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it next year. I don't know. I'm maybe considering going into law or something, but I guess my problem is I don't see what mock trial has to do with like real trials. Like we're not doing real law stuff. We're arguing in theory about how to keep the ice caps from melting. Like, what does this have to do with being a lawyer? Coach says, I get it. Listen, it's a concern I've heard before. I'll tell you what, you guys don't have school on Friday. I've got a buddy who's an attorney. He's always trying cases over at the Torrance courthouse. And he's got some cases on Friday. It's open to the public. You guys don't have school. Why don't you just go sit in on a day of real trials and, I don't know, see what you learn. See if anything happens. So this kid says, okay, I'll do that. It's going to rain anyway. I can't go surfing. So heads over to the courthouse, sits down, watches a day of trials. And his first reaction watching this, like 7 hours of municipal Torrance area court trials is, my gosh, it's so boring. Like, this is just the most monotonous. This is not CSI. This is not Law and Order. This is not the O.J. Simpson trial. This is like a guy fighting a parking ticket. This is like a guy trying to get an extra day of custody over his kid per month, like one extra day. This is a girl who got in a fight at a bar and hit somebody with a bottle and might have to go to jail for 1 week. And as he's watching all this and realizing, wow, this is so slow, the lawyers are tripping over their words, the judge drops all of his papers and so forth, super slow. It's not like TV, but it is real. These are real people's lives that are being affected. Like, parking ticket, who cares? But 1 day of custody over a kid per month might not seem like a big idea to you or to I, but that is a big deal to that dad and that kid. And, going to jail for a week, whatever, I'm tough. I could take a week in jail, but it's going to be a big deal to that girl. It's going to be a permanent black mark on her memory and or her resume. And maybe she'll probably lose her job because of this. So how's this going to affect her life? He realized that, okay, like maybe there was a little bit more to this. And he went back and he said, okay, coach, I'll do it, but only if we can have a parking ticket trial next year. So once again, I mean, he's not saying I'm going to be some big, powerful defense attorney, but you kind of have an idea that he's got a little more insight on maybe what it actually means to be a lawyer, maybe what the law means in our world. Maybe he'll be a better one because of it. And certainly he went and did something that not everybody would do. And those are the ingredients that make an impressive Make Waves essay. So guys, when you're thinking of your essays for this, what are the impressive things that you've done? What recognition have you received? I don't really care to hear about the award you got. I just want to hear about the experience. What did you do that maybe not everybody would have done? Again, show your success in the future by showing what you've done in the past. Okay, hold on. So, quirky with my camera again. Okay. Approach 2, be different. Colleges don't just want butts in chairs. They want all types of students. They want diversity. Now, this doesn't just mean like what religion you are or what country or state you come from. I would like to think we live in a world where we're past that. Obviously, we're not. But I would argue that for the sake of college admissions, you can't control that stuff. You can't control where you were born. You can't control what you look like. Also, no matter what you look like, there are other applicants that look like you. And so, regardless of where you might be different on the outside, what actually really matters is how you're different on the inside. And so, I'm not saying you can't write about your background. You totally can. But that doesn't do that much good in light of what's going on in here. And really what's different about you on the outside should translate to what's different inside. So talk about how your background or your life experience or who you are has given you perspective, has made you see what's different about the world and made you wiser. What they really like, you know, I mean, sure, colleges want just like a crayon box full of different looking and backgrounded type of people walking around on campus. But what's really good is that all of those people are bringing their different experiences to campus. That's the really rich diversity. And so show what perspective you bring. So start with what's different, but then go a step further. Again, let me show you guys what I mean by that. An essay entitled 50% Russia, 50% Redondo is about a kid who, when he was 9 years old, now he was 18 writing this essay, his parents, he'd lived in Moscow his entire life, and his parents said, "Hey kid, pack your bags, we're moving to Redondo Beach." So his essay opens, I think his first sentence went something like, "As I stepped off the plane at LAX," sounds like a Miley Cyrus song, "and saw my first ever palm tree, I realized, wow, I'm not in Moscow anymore." Okay, well, good start. I mean, a lot of people can't write an essay that starts that way. And the first draft of his essay, although it started well, kind of just evolved into the usual, "Hey, I'm from a different country, so you should let me in." Well, you're not the only one from a different country. There are other people from Russia applying here. Some of them have better numbers than you do, so why should we let you in? And so, you know, I talked to this kid and I said, we got to go deeper. We have to go deeper than just that one surfacey thing that makes you different. So let's talk about your experience. So as the essay developed, his story was that, started the same way as many people. When he first moved here, all he wanted to do desperately was fit in. I mean, what does any kid want to do when they move to a new country? So he didn't want to be a kid with a weird accent and weird clothes. He got rid of all his old Russian outfits and bought new contemporary stuff. He stopped skating and learned how to surf, and he started speaking English basically all the time and not even at home so that he can get rid of that accent. And 2 years in, he succeeded. Already fit in, he had good friends, his life was happy in his new home, and the end. No, that's the middle of the essay. Because then one day, his grandma called. His grandma from back in Mother Russia, who speaks not a word of English and speaks Russian really, really fast, and is just blah, 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 yammering to him on the phone, and he's realizing, oh my God, I can't understand what she's saying. Wait, that's not cool. He wrote his essay about assimilation. How everybody thinks assimilation means just changing yourself like a chameleon to fit into your new environment. That is part of assimilation. You do need to alter yourself a little bit when you move to a new place. But it's also about keeping some of who you are and altering your new environment to fit you. And so he said, no, I'm not cool with not being able to talk to my grandma. It's ridiculous. He'd lost his Russian fluency. And he wasn't going to just let it go that way. He was proud of where he had come from, despite how much he had changed. So started a Russian club at his school. Started wearing some of his old fashions and got a temporary trend of Russian footwear at his school to catch on temporarily. And most importantly, he started talking to his grandma for an hour every Sunday so that he could, keep a connection to who he is. So start with where you come from, what you're about, but go deeper. Find some observation that experience helped you make in the real world. Now, if you're just a generic suburban kid and you're like, well, I don't come from anywhere special, I'm just like every other kid in California, it doesn't have to be who you are, where you're from. It can be a crazy experience that you went through. This one summer, I went to summer camp out on Catalina Island, and it was just me and 15 other kids running around Lord of the Flies style. Okay, that is different, but what perspective did it give you? Did you learn when, Piggy had his glasses broken and was that later crushed by a rock thrown off a cliff by the evil kids, that you learned the savage nature of mankind? All right, well, that sounds like a novel. But find that lesson there. Show that you're a reflective, wise kid. They like those kids wandering around on campus. If they have some make waves kids, just future ballers getting ready to make it super rich, great. They like to have some of those. That way they can, afford nice buildings. They also want to have a bunch of kids who add like a richness to the campus, who are going to like make that campus just bubble with thought and philosophical wisdom. So that's another way you can go, is to be one of those kids instead. Another cool story, I had a kid who was a twin. And I know what you're thinking. Well, that's cheating. That's not fair. That twins are only 3% of the population. She's already like way ahead of me because she's so unique. Yeah, right. Twins are unique. They are only 3% of the population. But, some of these schools these days don't even let in that. They're not just letting in only twins. And that's how her first essay, by the way, her first draft was like, I'm a twin. I'll just write about that and I'll get in immediately. Okay, well, God bless the internet. I don't know how we found this, but her dream school was UCSB, which, as you know, is a very tough school to get into. We had somehow found, I don't remember where we were researching this, but we learned that in the previous year, there had been 200 or so sets of twins that had applied to UCSB, and they only let in 40 of them. And they all wrote about being twins. Now, I'm sure some of their GPAs weren't that great or their test scores weren't up to par, but wait, what? You can't just read about your twinness and you automatically get in? No, because they read 100 twin essays. No matter how obscure your background or your whatever is, you could be a one-legged albino lumberjack from Wyoming, but there's like 15 of you and they can only admit 3. How do you separate yourself from all the other one-legged albino lumberjacks from Wyoming? You talk about the wisdom that has given you. Because why does having only one leg make you a better college student anyway? Why does being a lumberjack make you a better, pre-med major at Berkeley or something? It doesn't really. It doesn't matter where you're from or anything about you. What matters is how that has shaped you. So this girl got in deeper about her specific twin experience. I always challenge kids like, okay, so you're on the color guard team. How was your experience doing that different than all the other people on the color guard team? Oh, you went to this camp. How was your experience different at the camp than everybody else who went to that same camp? How can you differentiate yourself in that sense? The way that this girl differentiated herself from other twins was her and her sister were like identical. They grew up, they looked the same, they acted the same, they wore the same clothes. Their mom obnoxiously dressed them the same. I can't do that. They also went to like a tiny elementary school. I think it was up in PV or something. And so fine, all was well. And then when the girls hit puberty, something kind of interesting happened. I guess this happens sometimes with twins, but they began to diverge. One of them's hair got a little darker. One of them's eyes even changed color, which sounds like a very X-Men thing to happen, but apparently happens with twins sometimes. One of them became more athletically inclined, the other more academically. And when they went to their ginormous high school, which had, 3,000 people in it instead of the 300 that were at their K through 8, and they looked at their schedules on that first day of classes, and the two girls realized they didn't have a single class together. And this girl sees her twin sister walk away from her across the common grounds for like the first time ever. She wrote her essay about diversity, or about individuality, not diversity. She wrote about how like everybody always wonders what it would be like to be a twin. I always wondered what it would be like not to be one. And on the first day of freshman year, I found out. wrote her essay about individuality, how nobody understands individuality better than her because for 15 years she wasn't one. She was just a copy of somebody else. So start with the thing that you do that most people don't do, or the piece of background you have, but go deeper. Because I don't really care that you have 4 fingers on your one hand. Why does that make you a better college student? It might make you worse at math. So make sure to tell me why, share the experience, share the wisdom you gained. Approach 3, be interesting. You got to read a ton of these guys. Make them remember you. And these are the viral ones you always hear about. And again, these are high risk, high reward. I'll talk about the dangers of this one in a second. But these are the ones where like some girl wrote her essay on a Papa John's pizza lid and mailed that in. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's so creative. One of my favorite stories, this is an old one back when people used to actually hand submit their essays. This one girl wrote her essay in backwards handwriting so that you had to read it with a mirror. And everybody thought that was amazing. She got into all these Ivy League schools and everything. And that's all fine and well, and that is interesting, but you do have to remember that this still has to fit you. A lot of copycats of that style of essay. Other people wrote their essays in backwards handwriting, and what you didn't hear from like the news stories and stuff is what that girl wrote her essay about. She wrote her backwards handwriting essay about overcoming her struggle with dyslexia. Oh, okay. So she can do that essay. Maybe I can't do that essay. You have to remember that this has got to fit you. You can always tell stories and use examples and start with a hook and stuff like that. But this can take many forms. You can be funny, you can be touching, you can be dramatic, you can do whatever fits your style. But don't use a gimmick that isn't you. Sometimes, I'll give an example of a funny essay here in a minute, and sometimes people are like, oh, that essay about the basement was so funny. Should I write a funny essay? And I always say, well, it depends. Are you funny? Because if you're not, oh, God, please do not try to write a funny essay. Oh, this can be so painful for everyone involved. Should I write a touching, like, sob story essay? First of all, no one's ever been admitted just based on how much the person cried. They may have gotten in because it was a beautifully written story that told a lot about them, but my dog died and I was emotionally crippled and couldn't go to school for a month. It's like, geez, we got bigger problems than this. I've had kids who are homeless. I've had kids who both of their parents died. I mean, if you write your essay about how like your dog died and it gets in the pile right after both my parents died, I don't want to be that. And they're rejecting people whose parents died. Like, as sad as it is, they don't have any sympathy. These are hardened, jaded people. Like, they've seen every hardship ever. And if they don't think that that hardship actually made you a better college student, then out the door. So yeah, you can tell a sad story, but it's got to show something about you. I'll give you guys an example of that in just a second. So think about writing just the craziest thing you've ever heard, the funniest story you've been through, the weirdest thing, how my armpits are like 2 swamps. I have this glandular sweating problem, this girl wrote, and it was like carrying around 2 swamps and headlocks, and it was embarrassing, and then she kind of learned to cope with it. One of those essay books has this famous essay about this kid who wrote about how he does all his best philosophical thinking while sitting on the toilet. Okay, they don't get that essay a lot. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It's got to still share something about you. But the third approach is just like, what's the craziest story you got? Like, what's the funnest thing you can write about? Go from there. Okay, let me make one last tweak here, and then I will. Okay. Let's dive into a couple of examples. Number 1, Jesse's uncle. So Jesse was this student who had his uncle, and his uncle was like Chuck Norris, Bear Grylls, Paul Bunyan, outdoor man extreme. This guy could do everything in the outdoors and taught Jesse everything about roughing it, how to camp, how to surf, how to hang a bear bag, how to grate cheese with his beard, how to build a fire using only 2 toothpicks and a stern glare. Anyway, Jesse had a great relationship with his uncle, but his uncle has a stroke. And unfortunately, the stroke leaves the uncle unable to do just about anything. Instead of camping and surfing and building stuff outside, the uncle is now confined to a wheelchair in his room. Jesse says, no, like, I'm not cool with that. I gotta do something. I gotta give back to my uncle who gave me so much. I can't like cure what's wrong with them. But maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some small things that I can do. So Jesse takes it upon himself to get a wheelchair with big fat inflatable tires that allows his uncle to go back out onto the beach again. Even if he can't surf, he can at least be there with the surfers. He gets a camper van with with a handicap accessible doors so that his uncle can, go camping one last time. The story doesn't have a happy ending. The uncle dies. But despite all of his sadness, Jesse realizes that in all this, his uncle still had taught him one last lesson, and that's that he really liked helping people. And that's why he wanted to go into medicine. Didn't know if he wanted to be a doctor per se, maybe a researcher or something, but something so that he could help people, so that he could see that look in his uncle's eyes one last time when he got to do one more camping trip. So yeah, that essay is, has some sentimental value to it. Notice that although it seems like an essay about somebody else, it's not. It's an essay about Jesse. So be careful if you're writing an essay about someone else that it's actually about you. Somebody else can be a guiding character in the essay. It can even seem like it's about them at first, but it really has to be about you. It also is a little bit of an impressive essay because I bet Jesse's going to make a good pre-med student. Other kids are going to be giving up after 3 consecutive all-nighters in the Orgo library. Jesse's still going to be there. He's going to do it for his uncle. So keep that in mind. Sometimes a really cool story will also just have a lesson built in that you can find later. Sometimes it's easier to take a really interesting story and find the lesson in it than it is to take a lesson story and make it interesting. So keep in mind this approach, at least as a window into some other things. Perhaps the opposite of the Jesse's Uncle essay is the basement essay. This was a ridiculous piece of writing this kid submitted about this room in his house. The whole essay was about this room. Basically, the story goes is this was the oldest of 3 brothers, all of whom were like big kids, like really rowdy. I think the younger 2 actually went on to both play like college football. The older one played some football, I think, in high school, but he wasn't like being recruited for it or anything. But basically, these kids, they fought all the time, and they were always trashing their parents' house. Everything was getting broken. They couldn't stop them from fighting. So finally, when they moved into a new house, the parents took the boys aside and said, all right, on move-in day, like, listen, you savages. Apparently, we can't keep you monsters from fighting each other, so here's the new rule with the new house. You can have the basement. It's just yours. You can do whatever you want down there. We're not even going to put any furniture down there because you're just going to break it. It's yours. We won't go down there. We won't enforce any rules. Do whatever you want. But if we ever catch you fighting in any other part of the house, we're going to lock you in the trunk of the car for the weekend. So this basement very quickly became like a Lord of the Flies, Hunger Games, gladiator arena where neighborhood kids would come and leave with missing teeth, and it's like basement fight club minus the fighting. It was basically the older brother's job to devise these thinly veiled excuses to just beat the snot out of his younger brothers. And the games that they would come up with were ridiculous. They had this game called Hernia, or it was like Hernia with an R, where all they did was they blocked out all of the windows with pillows and blankets so you couldn't see anything, and it's pitch black. And then they'd all run through the room swinging hockey sticks. And you knew that you had hit somebody because it made a different sound than when you hit the wall, and everybody else would take their hockey sticks and throw them like javelins so they knew where to aim. There was another game where the youngest brother's name was Alex, and the only rule of this game was just blast Alex with pillows in the head and neck until he falls down. And the game was called Blast Alex in the head and neck with pillows until he falls down. And Alex didn't particularly like this game, but everybody else sure did. In any case, this essay just goes on with this ridiculous description, and you're reading this and laughing, and you're like, what is wrong with this kid? Why would I admit him to my college? But I kind of want to hang out with him. And these are the essays that, like, when the one guidance counselor or the admissions counselor is like laughing, and this other kid's on their 15th Cub Scout essay in a row, and they're like, what's that guy reading? And he goes, dude, if you need a break from all those Cub Scout essays, read this thing. And they pass it around. Later, when they need like one more kid from the yes pile, like, which essay do you think they remember? So there is something to be said for just going for it and just writing the most ridiculous thing you can think of, seeing if that helps set you apart. That is the idea after all. Again, this is not for everybody, and this one has as many catastrophic flops as it has successes. You know, writing a sad or a funny essay fails utterly if the person has no sense of pity or no sense of humor. Then again, it can be the one that's like the 1 in 100 one. So sometimes I'll tell kids, like, for a reach school that's like really a reach, like you probably shouldn't get into this school with your GPA and stuff. Maybe this is your kind of Hail Mary. Maybe don't do this for a school that you should get into anyway. You can maybe go for a slightly safer essay, but you should always try to make all essays interesting. I mean, still start with a hook. Like the old cliche is, pop went my Achilles tendon as my soccer career ended. I mean, that's played out at this point, but put some color in it. You know, put dialogue in your essays. Put like rhetorical questions. Put dialogue. Put jokes. Like whatever will gussy the thing up. Or just start with the craziest story you can think of. So those are the approaches, guys. I don't know which one's right for you. Rarely is an essay all three of those things, so don't worry about trying to make something all three. But think about that. Like, what things have I done that are impressive? I don't have anything I've ever done that's impressive at all. Okay, then don't do that one. What's different about me? Oh, I have purple skin. Oh, I play the the cello underwater. Okay, I once killed a bear with my bare hands and a ripcord for my backpack. Okay, well, actually that last one's really an interesting essay. But what's different about you? Like, where do you come from? I don't know. I'm just the most generic cookie cutter kid you've ever seen. There's nothing interesting about it. That's not true. Dig deeper. I had a kid thought he was the most boring kid in the world, and for a while I had to agree with him because he really wasn't coming up with any ideas that were interesting at all. But finally we dug deeper, and he had his house had undergone some construction, just to make it nicer because he was already living in a nice area. But while that was happening, he and his family had to live in a trailer in their front yard for the summer. And they went from living in this, relatively nicely sized house to a teeny tiny trailer with 6 people living in it. And he's like, you'd never know how much you love and hate your family until you have to live with them in a phone booth over the summer. So that became something different that was a little bit interesting and showed something about his perspective. And then the third approach is, just what crazy thing has happened to you? What crazy thing have you done? What's the weirdest thing you could write about? Come up with a few ideas for each. On the next page, we'll see a brainstorming sheet where you want to come up with some of these ideas. Like, what are you really good at? When did you get a chance to show it? How will this ability help you in college or life? You don't have to physically write all these out, but jot some quick answers down. Or if you're too lazy to write something down, take your phone and just say your answer into it. Make yourself record for a whole minute and then just like spitball ideas. Something in there will have some potential. You'll come up with a lot of garbage ideas as well, but you'll come up with some good ones. Start with the sheet. Start with those ideas. I hope you've already started writing down some of the ideas that you've got. Another thing that you can do is read the prompts. I don't think I've included those in here. The prompts really come second. I've had essay readers, frankly, just tell me that they never even read what the prompt is. They just don't care. They just want to see your story. Sometimes it's better to just come up with all your ideas first and then later match them to a prompt, but sometimes that can help with the brainstorming as well. So talk to your friends, talk to your parents, brainstorm off these ideas, write down any that you've got already, come up with 10 ideas and then narrow those down into something that actually seems like it might be a good idea. Now, one last thing before I open this up to some questions and answers is, what about what's going on right now with COVID, quarantine, the apocalypse? I've kind of covered this already, but here's sort of an easy reference sheet. Essays that are directly about coronavirus, they're going to see a million of these. I mean, I hope people will watch this video or people will find out this from other advisors and stuff and not do this, but like, college applicants are just such bad writers, and so many people are just such hacks that there's just going to be a zillion. Here's how hard COVID was for me. My sister and I had to share a room and I almost killed it. Like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about how it ruined your junior prom. Like, just don't. That being said, an essay with a pandemic as a backdrop, but really about something else, is probably fine. Just to make sure it's actually about one of the above. It's either got to be how you were impressive, how you were different, or how you were interesting. If you helped run triage at your local overrun hospital and that showed you how you wanted to get into epidemiology, that could be a cool essay. That'd be a little bit of all three of those, frankly. Yeah, sure, COVID is in it, but as like a supporting background character, not as the whole essay. It's really about something else you did. Getting punched while working at CVS made me realize that humans are strange and panicky creatures. Okay, yeah, if you have a job at CVS and you kept going and while wearing your mask, some crazy lady, was fighting with toilet paper and you tried to, tell her that she couldn't take the display model and she punched you in the face. Like, that's an interesting story. I want to hear that. But you got to, again, share your wisdom. Why does that make you a better college student? Well, because I've realized what it is about human nature. And so toss some reflection in there. Essays that have absolutely nothing to do with COVID. Maybe something that happened a year ago. Especially good this year. Like normally this is all they get. So if you already had a story that you were working on last fall, like that might be extra good. It's not to say that it's like automatically better than something that happened now, but those will be more rare, and anything that is more rare is more good. Doesn't sound like good grammar. I think I'm not a writing teacher or anything. Anyway, so keep that in mind as you guys are continuing to brainstorm these out. As I said, guys, with the reduction of grades and the reduction of the SAT's importance on the test or on your applications, this essay thing is going to be so critical. It's really more important now than ever. But don't get intimidated. It doesn't start with you having a blank piece of paper and then just crafting an amazing essay in one draft. You start by just jotting down 10 ideas. Then you narrow that down to the 6 that actually don't suck. Then you brainstorm those out a little and you say, I'm not committing to anything, but what are like 10 different things I could write about my summer camping trip where I was, on Catalina Island for 3 months. I could write about this. I could write about that. I could write about that. Oh, those are all boring ideas. You got to get through the boring ideas before you get to the good ones. Ooh, I could write about that observation. That might be interesting. Sometimes you can even combine ideas. One of my favorite stories was a kid who had been brainstorming his essays and just none of the ideas were that great. He had a lot of kind of mediocre ones. Like one of them was how he had gotten cut from the band because he didn't practice. He was a drummer and he got cut. And then he tried real hard and he then made the team the next year and they went to like the regional tournament or something. Okay, it's all right, but I don't know if it separates him out from the crowd that much. Another essay he was considering was his dad had this heart operation. Just on like a routine visit to the doctor, they found this like weird heart murmur and they're like, oh my gosh, you got to have this emergency heart surgery. And I was like, oh, that sounds sort of interesting. I mean, it's not about you, it's about your dad, but what happened? And he's like, oh, he was fine. The surgery went really well and now he's good. So again, it's like, okay, kind of interesting for a minute, but where do we go? One thing you can do is what I call the combo essay, where you try to find weird thematic connections between different things. So happened with this kid that the band regional tournament happened at the exact same time as his dad was getting this heart surgery. In fact, he had to decide which one he was going to attend. And I was like, well, that's interesting. How did that conversation go? And he was like, well, it was a little awkward. I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, I got this band tournament thing that's scheduled the day of your surgery. I'll skip it. I'll just stay with you. And his dad said, no, don't do that. Like, you're not a surgeon. You can't help me. Like, I'm going to be unconscious anyway. Go to this tournament, this thing that you worked so hard for, and go do that. And then this great scene emerges where he's at this band competition as the drummer trying to do well and concentrate, but all he can think about is his dad in some operating room somewhere as he's drumming and like trying to drum his dad's beating heart back to life from across the miles. And it's this really cool moment. And so he builds a theme into it where like his dad always told him that like success comes from 2 things, hard work and good luck. And he found out about the hard work thing when he didn't work hard for the band and got cut. Then he figured it out and made it the next year, and the band worked hard and got to this tournament. His dad's thing was just luck. And so after his dad makes it, he was like, my dad was right. It is about hard work and good luck. We worked hard. We won that tournament. My dad, through the luck of having a good doctor and catching the thing in time, survived. So, I learned his lesson after all. Really great way of combining 2 pretty meh ideas into a really cool idea. So think about that too. If all of your ideas are kind of on the first draft here, maybe you can combine them. Maybe you can find a thematic connection or something. Okay, guys, I want to start wrapping this up, but I really encourage you to take this application brainstorm sheet home and fill this thing out. Read the prompts, write down any other ideas that you have. Come up with way too many, then narrow it down. Get rid of the ones that are bad, focus on the new ones. If you need some help with this process over the summer, we are doing our annual essay class over the summer. This will be conducted by Zoom this year. Which is actually a wonderful format for essays because you can just share screens anyway. There's information on that here, but basically in 7 weeks, we bang out all 4 of the Common App or the UC essays plus your Common App essay, just get it done by the time you go back to school, basically, which is really nice. So, you know, you can do that on your own too, but if you need some help, this is a pretty cheap way to do it. Anyway, this is not about us, this is about you guys. So I hope I've shoved you in the right direction already for these essays. But I do want to open this up if anybody has any questions. Let me stop my share and field anything from you guys. Does anybody want to ask anything? You can unmute yourself and raise your hand, or you can type it into the chat. Is there anything that I can still cover to help you guys take on this big dragon of a task this year? 2 people raise their hands. Okay, that is from, let's take Fiona first. So I'm going to unmute you, Fiona. Piper, I'll get to you guys next. Fiona, what is your question?
My question was, what is the word limit? 750, right?
650 for the Common App essay, unless they change it with COVID. I'll have to double check. I don't believe they've done that yet, but it's most years Common App 650. The UC essays are 350 each. Every essay is a little different though. If you're applying and there's a supplement for a certain school, it might be 500 words. More than 650 is sort of rare because they have so many of these to read, but you occasionally will see that. Sometimes a few words over the limit is okay. I would say that, you know, like anything, shorter is often better. I'm not saying the shortest essay wins like it does on the English section of the ACT or anything like that, but if you know you can tell your story in 550 words, please do not just pad it up to 650 words. That doesn't make it look like you worked harder. It made it look like you were lazy and didn't edit, and they're really appreciative of you saving them some time. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Piper, did you have a question?
Actually, Fiona asked my question too, so.
Perfect.
Good.
Yeah, that's a very easy question. You can always just look on whatever prompt it is and see what their word count is for that particular one. Anybody else? Fiona, do you have still your hand up or?
Oh, that is it.
That was it. Okay, cool. All right, well, if nobody has anything else, you're all welcome to stick around and ask more questions if you have a really embarrassing question, as long as it's about essays. I don't want you to ask me weird stuff about why your feet smell bad. But feel free to stick around after. But guys, thank you so much for joining in on this. If you're interested, we'll be doing a similar essay session coming up in July. We'll also be doing one for the SAT, ACT. On Saturday, I'm going to do one where I get deep into the what the heck is going on with the college admissions, like how you can be looking for colleges, what you should be doing regarding contacting colleges. Basically, like what should I do with my summer as far as the process goes. You're welcome to RSVP for that as well. That's also at pjtestprep.com. But guys, let me know if you need any help. Our essay class is there. I'm doing, you know, one-on-one consulting with people if you need any of that. And I'm happy to help you guys wherever you need. But also just feel free to ask me questions. I'll always answer them. Thank you guys so much. It's been great being here with you. And let me know what else I can help with. This is PJ signing off.